Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Paramahamsa Purudikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Purudikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavanda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So we'll be reading from page 550 today. 550. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 20th day of July 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are still in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Text 19 on page 550. Iti Chaitram Tatha Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madbhakta Etad Vigyaya Mad Bhavayopapadyate. Iti Chaitram Tatha Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madn Bhakta Etad Vigyaya Madn Bhavayopapadyate. Iti Chaitram Tatha Jnanam Geyam Choktam Samasataha Madn Bhakta Etad Vigyaya Madn Bhavayopapadyate. Iti chetam tata jnanam Gyeyam choktam samasataha Man bhakta etan vigyaya Man bhavayo papadyate. Iti chetrang tata jnanam Gyeyam choktam samasataha Man bhakta etan vigyaya Man bhavayo papadyate. Iti chetrang tata jnanam Gyeyam choktam samasataha Man bhakta etan vigyaya Man bhavayo papadyate. Iti chetram tata jnanam Gyeyam choktam samasataha Man bhakta etan vigyaya Man bhavayo papadyate. Page 550. Anyone else? Go ahead, Dimitri. Iti chetrang tata jnanam Gyeyam choktam samasataha Man bhakta etan vigyaya Man bhavayo papadyate. Anyone else? Iti chetram tata jnanam Gyeyam choktam samasataha Man bhakta etad vigyaya Man bhavayo papadyate. All right, I'll read the synonyms. Iti, thus, chetram, the field of activities, the body. Tata, also, jnanam, knowledge, gyeyam, the knowable, cha, also, uktam, described, samasataha, in summary, mat bhaktaha, my devotee, etad, all this, vigyaya, after understanding, mat bhavaya, to my nature, upapadyate, attains. Translation. Thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Purport. The Lord has described in summary the body, knowledge, and the knowable. This knowledge is of three things: the knower, the knowable, and the process of knowing. Combined, they are called vigyan, or the science of knowledge. Perfect knowledge can be understood by the unalloyed devotees of the Lord directly. Others are unable to understand. The monists say that at the ultimate stage, these three items become one. But the devotees do not accept this. Knowledge and development of knowledge mean understanding oneself in Krishna consciousness. We are being led by material consciousness, but as soon as we transfer all consciousness to Krishna's activities and realize that Krishna is everything, then we attain real knowledge. In other words, knowledge is nothing but the preliminary stage of understanding devotional service perfectly. In the 15th chapter, this will be very clearly explained. Now, to summarize, one may understand that verse 6 and 7, beginning from Mahabhutani and continuing through Chaitanya-dhrutihi, analyze the material elements and certain manifestations of the symptoms of life. These combine to form the body or the field of activities. And verses 8 through 12, from Amanitvam through Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam, describe the process of knowledge for understanding both types of knower of the field of activities, namely the soul and the supersoul. Then verses 13 through 18, beginning from Anadimat Padam and continuing through Vidisarvastivishtitam, describe the soul and the Supreme Lord, or the Supersoul. Thus three items have been described: the field of activity, the body, the process of understanding, and both the soul and the Supersoul. It is especially described here that only the unalloyed devotees of the Lord can understand these three items clearly. So for these devotees, the Bhagavad Gita is fully useful. It is they who can attain the supreme goal, the nature of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In other words, only devotees and not others can understand the Bhagavad Gita and derive the desired result. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, this Srila Prabhupada has given a very nice little summary of what we've read in this chapter up to now. Arjuna asks, again, 6 questions. He wanted 6 things clarified. What is the Prakriti, material energy, the Purusha, which is the living entity who's by nature Prakriti, but is taking the position of the enjoyer, or known as the Purusha. What is the Chaitra, or the field of activities, namely this body, gross and subtle, mind, intelligence, and ego, as well as the physical body. And what is the Chaitra Gya, the knower of the field? Now already you may have noticed we have kind of a duplicate, because the Purusha and the Chaitra Gya are the same. But there's a little difference in the perspective of how you're understanding it. Purusha means especially the living entity in the mood of trying to dominate and enjoy this material world. The Chaitra Gya is kind of a passive understanding. In other words, if one is introspective and he simply thinks of the situation, as Krishna joins us in the 2nd chapter, then you understand that this body is constantly changing. The mind is changing, the physical body is constantly changing. But I am simply observing all of that. I am the consciousness that knows these things. That's a different mood than trying to enjoy, you see? Trying to actually exploit this material world. So therefore, there's 2 perspectives of the same thing. Because Prabhupada says there's 3 subject matters here. But Arjuna has 6 questions. So then you have knowledge and the object of knowledge. Jnanam and the goal of knowledge. That was the last part. Jnanam and Gayam. So we learn that the knowledge, as Prabhupada nicely describes here, is from text 8 through 12. There's a list of 20 items of knowledge. The central one of which is unalloyed and uninterrupted devotion to me. You may remember that. Prabhupada says, without that, all the other items don't mean anything. And it begins with, what's the first one? So important. Yes. Humility. Because nothing really begins in spiritual life until you establish a relationship with a guru. Now that doesn't necessarily mean Diksha Guru. Don't forget there are different kinds of guru. Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru, and Vartma Pradarshika Guru. The devotees who go out and try to distribute books, even on their first day, they may meet so many people, be so frustrated, but one person is interested, you give them a card, come to the temple, you've just become a guru. Vartma Pradarshika. Vartma is path, Pradarshika means one who shows. So all of the aspects of guruship are necessary. The very official position of Diksha Guru, which is so exalted when you give initiation and welcome someone into the parampara, so that they get the mercy of all the previous acharyas also. That's such an exalted position. Shiksha Guru, someone who knows a little more than you do and is ready to give you some knowledge, but it's pure because it's following in the path. And the Vartma Pradarshika Guru. So that amanatvam, that pridelessness is essential. We went over this morning. Remember the essential verse in the 4th chapter? I'm sure you know this one. Tadvidi panipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti tegyanam jnananas tattva darshinaha. So tattvadarshi is one who is seen. In other words, whose senses have become so purified by the process of devotional service and by the mercy of the Lord that he's actually perceived the transcendence, the adhokshaja, who cannot be perceived by ordinary senses, Krishna in the heart and externally. And so such a person can really give you knowledge that's undoubtedly true. In other words, they have no ulterior motive in giving you that knowledge. That's a very important point, is that the person who's teaching you is not teaching you for any other reason than simply they want to enlighten you for your own benefit. Just as that's the key, is that there's no material motive involved. So amanatvam and then adambidvam. We went through this this morning. Prabhupada says Amanism is humility, and Adambidvam pridelessness. Well, that's one aspect, of it. But there's also, as I pointed out in Prabhupada's own definition in the 4th canto, Damba is bluffing or hypocrisy. In other words, one has to be very honest with oneself and with one's spiritual master and with Krishna. Otherwise, you don't get anywhere. And that's why it's so important to understand the Supersoul. The Supersoul is always with us. You can't hide anything from him. He knows your consciousness. And if you're being straightforward and if you're being honest and you're striving nicely, then you're going to get more and more inspiration from within to do the right thing. And you get the intelligence how to do it. He says right in the 10th chapter, you remember that? Tesham satati yuktanam bhajadam priti purvakam dadhami buddhi yogatam yena mamapi yantade. For those who are serving me with love, satati yuktanam bhajadam priti purvakam, then I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. So Krishna knows, if we're being, if we're faking it, or if we're actually sincere in our desire and our effort to advance. So I won't go through all of those points of knowledge, but they're very important. And what's the goal of knowledge? It's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's knowledge with a goal. And that's why we need to know the object of knowledge and the final goal of knowledge. And so this object of knowledge is the Supersoul and the soul. That counts as one here of the three. The soul with the Supersoul. In other words, there's the individual knower of the field, and then Krishna says, and I am also the knower in every field, at the beginning of this chapter. Chetra gim chapimam vidhi sarva chetreshu bharata. So we have an unbreakable relationship with the Supersoul, with Krishna. We can't break it, but we can forget it, if we really want to. If we want to try to become the enjoyers and the controllers of this world, then the Supersoul, who also says in the 15th chapter, from me come forgetfulness as well. If you really want to forget him, you can. And then you have to learn all the bitter lessons of what it means to try to exploit and enjoy this world and then be cast down in so much suffering, birth and death, until finally you, by the mercy of the preachers of Krishna consciousness, you become receptive to the message. And you realize, no, it's not possible for me to be in charge or to be controlling this material world. We're controlled at every moment. As you get older, you realize how fragile. Oftentimes before, but for certain, the body just is not going to live forever. You realize certain things, I had a pain in my knee this morning. Where the heck did that come from, Poor Majendanandana, those who, he's been here for about a year, because he retired, so he's been coming. So he starts coming in Mangal Artik, he's serious, because he was traveling and doing business for years, supporting his family. Then he's about 65, he's retired, shaved his head and everything. So he's come, and then, we have our enthusiastic little crew, as most of you weren't here at that point. And suddenly, he's dancing up a storm. He's jumping around, I can't do that anymore. And so it's quite amazing, and he does it whenever he can. But then I saw him, one day he was sitting on a chair by there. He says, "Oh, my knee went out." Like he said, he used to be an athlete, so he couldn't do it, But the desire was there, Same with me. If I dance on this floor, I'll need crutches the next day, ankle, knee, like that. But so the point is, this is kind of a blessing, because it tells you, time is going. Your time in this body is expiring. So get serious. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, But if we're smart, we'll get to that point of seriousness even when we're young, because we can see nobody escapes this. It's just the way the world works, So Krishna is giving us this knowledge here, and he said something very important at the end, and this comes up again in the Gita and the Bhagavatam. Mad bhakta etad vigyaya, that only my devotee can actually understand this. Because so much of the understanding is coming from within. It's not just you're figuring it out or understanding how A and B and C work together. Krishna is giving you the understanding from within, and more importantly, he's giving you the inspiration as to why it's important to know this. Because there's millions of people they're not exposed to this, and even if they get it, they don't think, well, it's not important. I got things to do. Yeah. But there's nothing more important than understanding these points, which, as I explained before, a lot of it may be a little technical knowledge, but we should be fascinated by it because it's how the world works. It's how this universe is working. And when we understand that, it forms a firmer foundation under our faith. Because so much of Krishna consciousness, there's so many aspects to it. Some of it is this wonderful chanting and dancing, festivals, there's Krishna, and this is the essence of the whole thing. But there's a tremendous depth of philosophy. You know, read the 11th canto. In the 11th canto, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna expands on many of these subjects. You know, I'm just reading. Uddhava asked the question, you know, some philosophers say there's 24 different elements, and some say there's 28. And I've heard also there's 21. How can it all be true? And Krishna explains, well, yes, you know, they analyze in different ways, and they're all very sincere. And then he starts giving the different list. And you realize that there's different ways of understanding the material energy. But the basic principle is that this is external energy, dead energy, it's not living. And I point to our own body as well. It's just a corpse. Yasyatma buddhi kunapetvi dhatuke. Prabhupada will quote this verse constantly. This is spoken by Krishna. And he's a Kurukshetra. And all these great sages and munis come. You know, and Vasudeva's father is going to perform so many sacrifices. And Vasudeva, when he sees these great sages, they're landing in, you know, they're coming in from outer space and everything. And he takes the advantage and he says, oh, you know, look how fortunate we are. He offers obeisances and prayers. And then he says, please instruct me in, you know, spiritual life, you know. And they're dumbfounded. His son is Krishna. His son, you know, he's got the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because he's in, you know, in the mood of a father there, he's looking to them to please instruct me in you know, life. So Krishna gets into the mood, and he presents himself. I mean, if you read the commentaries, this verse, he's describing, you know, how householder life is so dangerous, you can get easily bewildered, you know. So this verse, he says, ordinary people have this concept. As yasyatma buddhi kunape tridhatuke swadikalatradisho bhoma ijyadi. Yat tirtha buddhi salile nakarichit janeshu bhigeshu saeva gokaraha. Now the last phrase says, someone who has this mentality that I just listed, they're like gokara. Now gokara is a Sanskrit word that can be divided in two. They're like a cow or a donkey. But there's another way of thinking about it, because, you know, we're very partial to the cows. You know, we don't. It can be like a donkey who carries the load to feed the cows. But the point is, not very smart. Not very smart. So what is this list? Yasyatma buddhi kunape tidatake. The word kunape can mean bag, but it can also mean corpse. If one thinks I am, that's what I am. Yasyatma buddhi. That I am this bag full of all the three dhatukes, mucus, bile, and air. Which one of those do you really identify with? You know. Do we really want to think, yeah, I'm just a bag full of mucus, bile, and air? That's me. No, we don't think like that. But that's actually when we identify with the body, that's what we're saying. And what belongs to me is my wife and home and family and friends and all of these different things, bank balance. That's mine. So right away you see you have me and mine on a false basis. And that's the essence of the ahankar, the false ego, false sense of self. Yes, buddhi kunapeti dar swadika bhoma ijadi. Now, the bhoma ijadi has different meanings. The Prabhupada would always point to one special meaning, which is very prominent today, is that the land where you're born is worshipable. In other words, nationalism. You know, this is another form of ignorance. It's expanding on this material, bodily concept of life. And then, okay, you know, I have this misconception, you know, but I know I should go on pilgrimage. And do, you know, and in this way I'll get some pious credits. You know. So you go to the place, and usually there's some river or body of water there. You bathe there, and you think, oh, my pilgrimage is over, and I come back. You don't take advantage of the great souls who live there, who you can hear from and learn something. In other words, it becomes an empty ritual. So one who has this mentality is fool number one. So this knowledge that we're learning here is meant to lift us out of that external bodily concept of life or even mental concept of life and give us an understanding of really what's going on. We have this machine called a body, which in the 18th chapter, Yantra Rurani Mayaya, it's a machine made by and of the material energy, given to each one of us, each birth we have. Different species, different races, different parents, whatever. But it's simply a machine. It's not us. So what's the meaning of it? It becomes useful and it becomes meaningful when we use this body to connect to Krishna. This is called yoga, bhakti yoga. The eyes, especially the ears, the tongue, the voice, all the senses, active as well as knowledge acquiring. When we use them under training from the Shastra and the Guru, how to connect to Krishna. The first is the tongue. What does it say? Jivado. What does it say? Sevan mukhe jivado swayameva spurachita. That with our present senses and mind, we cannot perceive the transcendence. Atak Shri Krishna namadi namave grayam indriyai. Now this word grayam is important. I think I spoke about this. In the English language, you have this word grasp to mean understand. I don't grasp it. The mind can't. So that's what this word graya means, to grasp. Understand. With our present senses in mind, we cannot understand adhokshaja, that which lies beyond the range of the senses in the mind. It's a name for Krishna. Atta Krishna nabave grayam indriyai sevan mukhe hijivado. But beginning with the tongue, if one begins serving that Supreme Person, then the senses of the mind become purified, and eventually that Krishna reveals himself. This is the whole idea, is that Krishna reserves the right of not being understood by the greatest intellects who have no bhakti. He remains invisible to them. But the simple devotee, who may not be even illiterate, who nevertheless sincerely chants and serves and follows, then eventually gets all revelation. This is what this means. So we're getting that revelation now. Srila Prabhupada has explained it to us. What he's quoting here often is a commentary of Baladev Vidyabhushan, great learned sage. It's nice to know what these epithets are. Vidyabhushan. You know what it means. Don't say. Hey, can anyone say? You know what a bhushan is? Vidya we know. Come on. Knowledge. And bhushan? Ornament. One who has the ornament of knowledge. In other words, one who is very learned, he gets the very bhushan. Kaviraj, king of poets. Krishna is Kaviraj. So, Vidyabhushan, Baladev Vidyabhushan is giving so much knowledge from the Shastra. Prabhupada is quoting some of it. So we want to become his bhaktas. So the whole point, mad bhavayo papadyate. This is the whole goal of everything we're doing, to regain the nature of Krishna. Prabhupada quoted, cited this phrase, "Go back home, back to Godhead." That's exactly what mad bhavayo papadyate means. To become free of all of the ignorance and dross in our consciousness that we built up over millions of births, have that purified, cheto darpana marjanam. And what remains is a pure love for Krishna, the consciousness. I was sharing this verse, came up recently. I saw a class by Vaisheshika Prabhu online, and he quoted this verse, and I couldn't place it right. I know that verse. What is that? And then I recalled, this is one of the verses describing the Uttama Bhaktas in the 11th canto. There's one of the 9 Yogendras. He's asked, how can I tell who's the top Bhakta and who's in the middle and who's the neophyte? So there's 3 verses, which I won't go into, that are most famous, that are quoted all the time, And then after those 3, he quotes with the Kanishtadikari, the lowest. Then he gives 6 or 7 verses describing the highest, the Uttama. And the last 3 are just pure nectar. And he's describing how Krishna agrees to come under the control of the love of a devotee who develops love. He describes it like the ropes of love, binding Krishna in your heart with the ropes of love. So the last 3 so it goes like this. I'll share these with you. It says, Tribhavana vibhavahet ave vakunta smita dajitapa sorade bhiva mrigyat Nachalati Bhagavat Pradada Vinda Lavanda Mishada Babayaksa Vaishnavagraha. You know this one? You know all these slokas. Lavan. Yeah, and you've been doing it, right? This was like a few years ago, right? 7 years. So 7 times 365, that's 2,100 verses. Wow, okay. We have to get together. We'll spend a little time. So, Tribhavana Vibhavahe. Tribhavana is the 3 worlds. Hetave, for the sake of the opulences in the 3 worlds, right? Tribhavana Vibhava. Vibhava is like Vibhu. We had the Vibhuti Yoga chapter in 10. All of Krishna's opulences manifest in different expansions. So, for the sake of all the opulences in the 3 worlds, Indra Loka, Brahma Loka, whatever you can think of, the pure devotees will not agree to, and they're akunta smriti, they're unbroken remembrance. They have unbroken remembrance of Krishna's lotus feet. This is one of the characteristics of the pure devotees. They would not agree to forget those lotus feet for a split second, for the smallest second. You might think, well, come on, I'll just forget for a split second, then go back to remembering, and I'll use all that Lakshmi and everything to build 1 million temples for Krishna. That's our calculation. But those who love Krishna so much, they can't imagine that forgetfulness. Now there's 2 things that one is separation and one is and then the other is forgetfulness. Separation happens all the time. The highest level of bhakti is love and separation, but there's no forgetfulness. It becomes more intense, the remembrance in separation, and then comes the meeting and it's so ecstatic. That's full remembrance. So that's the first thing. The qualification is constant remembrance. Avismriti. Krishna Padara Vindaya. Do you know this one too? Don't. He knows all the sloka. I'm going to find one you don't know. So then he goes on to describe the benefits of remembering, constant remembrance of those lotus feet. So you have to remember the lotus feet. They have these beautiful toenails. They're like jewels. But here they're described as little moons, and they give you off this moonshine. So the next verse goes like that. Bhagavata uddhavikkamangi shakha nakamandi chandrakayana rastatape vidikatamupasidhatam punaksa pabhavati chandhi bodhate katape. Did I get it right? This one you don't know. I found one you didn't know. So then he describes, okay, he's meditating on those lotus feet, and what the effulgence emanating from the toenails completely eradicates any of the miseries in the material that he might feel in the material world. Just like the moon rising on the desert. After you spend a day in the desert, try to get some shade and sweating like anything, barely surviving. The sun sets and this cool moon rises and you get so much relief. It's described like that. So how could such a devotee ever experience any kind of misery in this material world? And then the last one is my favorite. Visrajati, because what's Krishna's role in this? What does he do on his side? Visrajati vidiyam nayasa sakshad hadada vishab hidau bigaga nasha pranaya vishanaya tadang vipadma sabhavati bhagavata pradhana ukta. Right? So, yeah. So Krishna will never leave the heart of such a devotee. And then it gives, come on, he's so merciful that even if you chant his name indifferently, he agrees to eradicate whole lifetimes full of sinful reactions. So what to speak of the devotee who's thinking of his lotus feet at every moment, and who has tied his lotus feet in his heart with the ropes of love. Pranaya Vishanaya Tridangri Padma. Sabhavati Bhagavata. But such a devotee is the highest level. So that kind of experience is the ultimate goal. That's Madbhavaya Upapadyate. Notice Madbhava, has a similar, the other meaning is ecstatic love, right? The first stage of prema is bhava. So this is the level at which Krishna lives, Anandamayo Bhyasat. By his activities, he reveals that he's always full of ananda. And we're part and parcel of Krishna, so that's our real nature. To be ever increasingly blissful at every moment. Now you can't find even a hint of that in the material world. The material world is just dukkhalayam shashvatam. And there are a few points where you can relieve the misery and experience a little happiness, a little pleasure. But it goes. What is that? There's one verse, oh God, I can't remember now, where he says, so much of the happiness in the material world is the anticipation of it. Oh, this is Prahlad. God, you know? No, not that one, the other one. It's not Yasmat Priya Priya Vayogasi. Kutrashisha Shruti Sukha. That's it. Kutrashisha Shruti Sukha Mrigatrishni Rupa Kvedam Kaleva Namasheshura Jambiroha. Do you know what? Kvedam Visheshura. Kutrashi. He says, what is the use of this aspiring for material happiness, which most of it is Shruti Sukha, is that it's the happiness of anticipating it. I give the example. There's a fellow, he lives in Kansas, all right, with his family. And he's a hard-working guy, you know, and he's saving up money, and his kid, he sees on the TV about Disneyland, you know. So they have an aspiration. Well, someday, a few years from now, we'll have enough money, and we'll be able to go to Disneyland. We'll buy an RV, you know, we go to the RV, and we'll go. And so finally, he has all the money, you know. So they're in great anticipation. And they travel, you know, from Kansas to California. And, of course, this is before COVID, but in the RV, and, you know, come on, you got your 6-year-old kid in there, and he's restless, you know, and screaming, and it's a struggle to get there. It's a big austerity, you know. So they finally get there. I've never been to Disneyland, but I've heard, you know, and it's like $65 a ticket. You're standing online, you know, and the kid is screaming, you know. He gets on the ride, he throws up, you know. In other words, the whole thing was in the anticipation. The actual experience doesn't quite meet it. And then, but you take all the videos, you know, so you have your memories, and finally, you know, you have to traipse your way back all the way to Kansas, and that's it, you know, your high point. But there's so many, you know, things that don't meet their expectation in the material life. So that's the high point. Then there's all of the horrors and the pains and the diseases and things like that. So imagine a world. You know, imagine an experience where there's none of that. Even in the material world, we find, like Prahlad is saying, that I have no suffering. He proved it. You know, his father tried to boil him, kill him by boiling him in oil, crushing him under the elephants, throwing him off a cliff, poisoning, chopping him. Any way that you can think that at that time they had to kill people. And he wasn't even troubled by it. He was so protected by his absolute surrender and full absorption in thinking of Krishna that he wasn't even aware of it. You know? And here he's saying, I'm absolutely free of any distress. Because at any time, and this is very important for us because we can do it too, Tvadvirya Gayana Mahamrita Magna Chitta. At any time I can sing your glories and immerse my mind in an ocean of nectar. You don't even, all you need is a tongue and an ear. You know, you don't even need a cell phone. In other words, you have the ability right now to experience that if we just have the right technique. Like this morning, I was remembering a verse. I know you don't know this one. This is from the Govinda Viradavali. This is a poem by Rupa Goswami. Now, don't forget, what was their material situation? You know, as poor as you can possibly be. You know, no house, no clothes, no place to live. Barely, they hardly ate anything. You know, and sleeping maybe an hour and a half sometimes. Not on a big bedstead, you know, on the ground. But they were the richest. They were the richest. There was a Gopi Bhavada Samratabda Lahari Kalola Magnomahor. They gave up everything for the sake of preaching and writing and, you know, doing what these are the Goswamis. And they just had rejected clothes, you know. But the third line of the verse says, Gopi Bhavada Samratabda Kalola Magnomahor. Again and again they were diving and swimming in the ocean of the gopis' love for Krishna, which is the highest, most intense happiness and bliss you could feel. So we should aspire for this. We should believe in it. This is what all the acharyas are saying. It's real. They've described it. So Rupa Goswami, he gives us a prayer here. I had memorized it many years ago, and I hadn't chanted it. But suddenly it came to mind. I'm sitting in a corner there this morning. Spuradindiva the sunda the sanda tadana the kandali kanda mantava padada vinde nandaya gandhi nagovinda. He's praying that Krishna will delight him with the fragrance of his lotus feet. And if you notice the verse, I mentioned this before in class, the ND sound, how it's indicative and it's evocative of bliss. Ananda, Nanda, Nandana. So listen to the NDs here. Spuridindi vada sundara sandra ananda kandali kanda. Mantava padada vinde nandaya gandhena govinda. And in 2 lines you've got about 10 NDs in here. So what he says, Spuridindi vada sundara. Oh Krishna, who have the complexion of a fresh Indivra lotus blossom. This is one of the I haven't seen that kind of lotus, but it has Krishna's nice bluish color. Spuridindi vada sundara Sandutadana the Kandali Kanda. Your lotus feet are the root of the creeper of the most intense bliss. Sandra is intense, and Sandratara is most intense. Ananda, Sandratana Ananda, Kandali Kanda. Mam Tapapadadaminde. Oh, may your lotus feet, to me, Mam Tapapadaminde, Nandaya, delight, Nandaya Gandhena Govinda. The fragrance, Gandhena, of those lotus feet always delight me. So, Krishna's Kavya, I want to give this other verse that I just memorized, the second to last verse in the CC, but it's also about those lotus feet. And in Giridhari, he uses the name Giridhari, so I memorized it. That the devotees who are pure, they're like bees, rasikas, who are always able to smell that fragrance of Krishna's lotus feet, which pervade the whole universe. You can't smell it now because we're covered. But Krishna is everywhere. That means the whole experience of his being is everywhere. So he's saying that, those be like devotees, they can never give up that fragrance. So the idea is that Krishna is always with us. We always have the access. We just have to tune our senses and our mind and our consciousness so that we can experience what's already there. And this Bhagavad Gita is helping us. So I'm afraid I got a little bit off topic. Yes, Prabhu? The bees? Okay, well, there's different words for bees. The sloka. Palimalavasa the bhuvanam sodasamo the rasagya rolambam. Rolambam is bees. That's half the verse. Palimalavasa the bhuvanam sodasamo the rasagya rolambam girida the chatanam bodham kakadasika samihate hatum. So this Parimalavasa the bhuvanam, the fragrance of the lotus feet is pervading the whole universe. It's right in its Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada translated. Sodasomada the rasagyarodambam, and the be-like rasika devotees are always maddened by that fragrance. So rasa own madata, their own rasa in relation to that. Giridhari chadanambojam, the lotus feet of Giridhari. That's why I like it, but Giridhari is right here. Where is that rasika who would ever give up that fragrance? Who would wander from those lotus feet? So we should try to be those rasikas. All right, I travel a little bit far off the subject of the verse, but Mad Baba is here. So.
Hare Krishna, can I ask a question, Prabhu? Quick question.
Please, Dhanavari Mataji.
Thank you so much. A very, very nectarous class. This you covered so much, Prabhu. It's really nice. Thank you so much. My question is, you said there are 3 gurus. One guru is who gives Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru, and what was the third one? I didn't understand. Would you please repeat?
Vartma? Vartma?
Yeah.
Pradarshika. Vartma Pradarshika. Pradarshika means showing, one who shows. A Pradarshika, one who shows. Darsha, to see, he shows the path, which is the Vartma. Vartma is the path, one who shows the path. In other words, he may not have so much knowledge himself, but he can point him to the temple entrance. In other words, anyone who helps someone else to become Krishna conscious is a Vartma Pradarshika Guru. So,
Varta Pradarshika?
Vartma. Read the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's all about the different gurus. It emphasizes Shiksha and Diksha, but I think Vartma Pradarshika is there. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right, let's do another verse. Text 20. Prakatim Purusham Chaiva Vidyanadi Ubhavupi Vikarangs Chagunangs Chaiva Vidhi Prakriti Sambhavan. Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Purport. By the knowledge given in this chapter, one can understand the body, the field of activities, and the knowers of the body, both the individual soul and the supersoul. The body is the field of activity and is composed of material nature. The individual soul that is embodied and enjoying the activities of the body is the Purusha, or the living entity. He is one knower, and the other is the Supersoul. Of course, it is to be understood that both the Supersoul and the individual entity are different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entity is in the category of his energy, and the Supersoul is in the category of his personal expansion. Both material nature and the living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of the superior energy. Both the living entities and the material nature existed before the cosmos was manifested. Material nature was absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, and when it was required, it was manifested by the agency of the Mahatattva. Similarly, the living entities are also in him, and because they are conditioned, they are averse to serving the Supreme Lord. Thus, they are not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. But with the coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. This is the mystery of this material creation. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. In the scriptures, the Lord says that those attracted by this material energy are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. But we should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also productions of material nature. All transformations and variety in respect to the living entities are due to the body. As far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. So, more interesting knowledge. Now, this idea that the material energy is also beginningless or eternal, you have to understand this concept of manifest and unmanifest. When the material energy is unmanifest, there's no universes, there's no worlds, there's nothing going on. We're also unmanifest. We're within the body of Mahavishnu, countless living entities. This is described in detail how these annihilations take place. At the end of the external breath of Mahavishnu, he starts breathing in, and everything starts to be destroyed. I think the fire comes first, right? The Anantashesha starts breathing from his. It describes he gets a little angry that these people haven't gone back to Godhead yet, and so he starts breathing fire, and everything starts. It's almost like what we're experiencing now. These forest fires more and more devouring this 120 degrees in Vancouver. What is that? And even in above the Arctic Circle in Siberia, they had above 100 degrees. So, I'm not saying that, the universal annihilation is about to happen. But you can see how fire and flood can destroy everything, one after another. So that's what it is, huge fire, huge flood. And there's no more physical bodies, there's nothing, what happens to the soul? We get drawn into the body of Mahavishnu, and we're in suspended animation. We're not dreaming. We're still living entities, but there's really no, we're just in suspended animation. Until, again, we come out, because our karma is still there in subtle form. So we have all these unfulfilled desires, and we come out again manifest, So how many times would this happen? Who knows? But we want to try to make it end. We don't want to be around when that annihilation happens. We want to get out this lifetime. So unmanifest. What does it say? Vidyaka Navabi. They're both matter and spirit are beginningless. And then Prabhupada touches upon this idea. Well, how did we come in contact with matter? And the ultimate answer, the Prabhupada, there's a letter. There was a whole contention about this. Some of you may be aware. Did we fall from the spiritual world, or have we always been here? Well, I mean, if you read Prabhupada's books, what does it mean? Go back home, back to Godhead, unless we were once there, right? So in Prabhupada's understanding is that we were once there, and it was our decision to turn our back on Krishna. I mean, it's right there in the Bhagavad Gita, as far as I can see. That verse, I think you referred to Bhayam Dvitiya Abhinaveshatak, Bhayam Dvitiya Abhinaveshatak Syad Ishadapetasya Viparyo Smriti, Asmriti. Ishadapetasya means turning away from the Isha, from the Lord. This is the original sin, if you will. And since we're conscious, we turn away, then we get absorbed in the external energy. And what is the external energy for? Well, it's for two purposes. One is to give us a field like this body, but also all of the other field that we have, for engaging in our material desires and trying to be independent of Krishna. But Krishna just doesn't abandon us there, right? There's this whole personal aspect. We're his offspring. He's our father. We've forgotten him, but he hasn't forgotten us. The classic example, the father's sitting there in Idaho somewhere, raised the kid, and the kid suddenly runs off at age 16, goes to San Francisco. Oh, what happened to my boy, Like maybe I'll go try to find him, or just hoping that he'll call, The kid is meanwhile absorbed in so many different things, he's forgotten. That's my parents, they're old-fashioned. I'm having an adventure here. How many millions of times did that happen? So Krishna is like that, in one sense. He doesn't forget. He stays with us as a super soul. And as he describes here in the famous fourth chapter verses, Yada yada dharma saglana bhavati bharata, when there's a dharma in this world, why should Krishna care? He's happy with dancing with the gopis in Goloka Vrindavan. If these fools and rascals want to, go and beat their head against the wall, try to enjoy, let them. I got my. No, he's not like that. He cares unlimited. Why? He describes Suridam Sarvabhutanam, end of the 5th chapter, right? I am the well-wishing friend of every living entity. And Prabhupada describes Surid is the most intimate friend. Always a well-wisher. You can't find that on the material plane. There's always a limit, Hey, you've been sleeping on the couch for 6 months. I can't, no more, Jimmy. You have to find somewhere else. There's always a limit, right? You have some friend, Maybe for a blood relative you'll do more, but there's always a limit. But there's no limit. Krishna's in the heart of the ant. He's in the heart of the, beast. He's in the heart of, we're in our hearts, accompanying us. And he keeps coming here to try to rectify things. Speak the Bhagavad Gita. He sends his representative, speaks, maintains the whole thing. Because he never gives up on us. So it's a reformatory as well. In other words, there's lessons to be learned. Right? This is one of the cliches of the movement. I haven't learned all my lessons yet, so that's true. But you have to know where to go to find how to really get the right lessons. We have to be fortunate enough to come in contact with someone who can give us the truth. And we've done that in Prabhupada's books. So that's the other purpose. One is to, let us spin out all of these desires to try to enjoy. But the other one is to come to the conclusion that we really can enjoy. This isn't our home. Is there an alternative? And this is yes. You see, come back to Godhead. So that's the purpose of this. Let's see. They're not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky because we're rebellious. So the whole point of our process is to reform, so we're not rebellious anymore. That's why we're trained bowing down, learning, to be humble and live as simply as possible, and most importantly, chanting Hare Krishna. That is Lord Chaitanya's Krishna, as Lord Chaitanya says, great mercy, the simplest process. If you can just take to that seriously, try to perfect that, then everything is accomplished. You can Cheto Darpana Marjanam. You can purify your consciousness. You can get knowledge. You can dive into the ocean of ever-increasing bliss, right? Because you're actually tasting rasa, all from the chanting. So we're in that sampradaya, are very fortunate. But cultivating this philosophical knowledge is important, as I explained, because it keeps us. Our intelligence needs to be also fed and understanding why we're doing what we're doing and what's going on. We're over time. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. So we'll resume tomorrow, text 21.